This is WFYI News Now. It's January 13th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, a Republican state representative has been chosen to lead Indiana's Department of Natural Resources. Gary Community School Corporation's response to a bill that would dissolve certain school districts. And moves to reduce homelessness in Indianapolis have been lagging for years. One housing solution involves permanent supportive units.
So you have an entire building that is dedicated to supportive housing. And so folks are coming into that building with a rent subsidy, and they're partnered with a service provider that is really walking alongside that person.
Those stories coming up, but first. Mike Braun will be sworn in as the 52nd governor of Indiana today, while Micah Beckwith will take the oath of office as lieutenant governor and Todd Rokita as attorney general. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith has more on Indiana's Inauguration Day.
The ceremony will include inaugural addresses from each office holder. Both of Braun's most recent predecessors, Mike Pence and Eric Holcomb, warned against complacency in their speeches. Pence's address included a call to action for all Hoosiers.
If you have a job, work at it as never before. If you serve the people, serve with all your heart. If you can build a business, do. If you can start a business, try.
Holcomb's first inaugural cast a vision for the future.
Our harvest today might include driverless cars or pilotless barges or stronger, more flexible metals or breakthroughs for Alzheimer's disease.
Indiana has been led by Republican governors for 20 years. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the Statehouse.
Republican State Representative Alan Morrison has been tapped to head up Indiana's Department of Natural Resources. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel reports he says he intends to help carry out Governor-elect Mike Braun's agenda to look for efficiencies in rulemaking.
For more than a decade, Morrison has served House District 42, which represents Park and Vermilion counties, as well as parts of Vigo, Fountain, and Clay counties. He's also a member of the House Environmental Affairs and Natural Resources Committees. Morrison says he plans to use his position to make regulations more efficient at the DNR, along with the Department of Environmental Management and the Utility Regulatory Commission.
Working as a team to help move forward that economic development and make it easier for businesses to grow, move in, that's what our goal is.
Among other things, Morrison sponsored bills in the past to significantly reduce protections for the state's wetlands, which benefited home developers. He also supported bills to allow industries to capture their carbon emissions and store them underground. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
When asked about the state's tight budget this year, Morrison said he favors increasing revenue for the DNR through economic development rather than upping taxes or fees at the state's parks. He's resigning as state representative today as Mike Braun is sworn in as governor. And it's hardly a surprise, but the Gary Community School Corporation does not want to be dissolved. As Indiana Public Broadcasting's Michael Gallenberger reports, House Bill 1136 drew a number of concerns during last week's school board meeting.
The bill would dissolve school districts in which the majority of the students living there don't attend the district's schools, and then turn those schools into charter schools. Gary School's Chief of Public and Community Relations, Chelsea Whittington, noted that the district saw a mass exodus of students during the 7-year state takeover, but enrollment has increased since it returned to local control last year.
We're 6 months out of state takeover. The actions of the district are being taken to, again, recruit students back, and now this legislation seeks to stop us in our tracks, if you will.
Board members said they're taking the issue seriously, and they're talking with members of other school boards around the state to plan a coordinated response. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Michael Gallenberger.
And for our final story today, the number of people experiencing homelessness in Indianapolis has not improved much in recent years. Leaders say permanent supportive housing is a key piece of the puzzle to reduce homelessness. WFYI's Zach Castle reports on how Indianapolis is doing in efforts to increase the city's stock of supportive housing.
Rusty Johnson knows the streets. He said he was homeless for over 20 years.
The degradation and the traumatic experiences of being homeless had an impact on me spiritually, physically, and especially mentally.
Through Johnson's housing journey, he navigated a criminal record, drugs and alcohol, depression, and serious health issues. He eventually qualified for a furnished apartment in a complex that provided wraparound services. Johnson is now involved in harm reduction and street outreach work. Chelsea Herring-Cozy, Executive Director of the Indianapolis Coalition for Homelessness Intervention and Prevention, or CHIP, says supportive housing projects like this work.
So you have an entire building that is dedicated to supportive housing, and they're partnered with a service provider that is really walking alongside that person.
Johnson shared his story last November with over 100 people gathered for a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new housing complex on the Near East Side. Compass on Washington is a 36-unit complex that provides permanent supportive housing for people experiencing chronic homelessness in partnership with Horizon House, a local nonprofit located next door. Leaders at the city, CHIP, and Horizon House all said local housing retention rates are higher than the national average, above 90% when using supportive housing models. Compass is the 9th permanent supportive housing project the city has opened since 2020, according to data WFYI obtained from the Indianapolis Department of Metropolitan Development. The city has added 358 units of total permanent supportive housing in the past 4 years. In 2018, Indianapolis set an ambitious goal to end homelessness by 2023. The plan outlined the creation of 222 units of permanent supportive housing per year, for a total of 1,110. That hasn't happened. Stakeholders said that there are many reasons and that the city has had to adapt the 2018 plan. Rodney Stockman is the city's senior policy director for homelessness at DMD.
Frankly, when the plan was developed, it was kind of not based on a lot of factual mapping.
He said that these projects rely heavily on a complicated federal funding stream administered through the state called the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program that has made financing units difficult because of interest rates. CHIP's Herring-Cozy says the projects like these involve complicated logistics. The pandemic also impacted costs.
Supply chain issues created lots of delays in building and the construction process. It has taken a lot of time to develop new projects.
The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 infused funding into a federal affordable housing program. Stockman said Indianapolis spent $7.5 million of its $15 million allocation on permanent supportive housing. The city estimated that each person would need about $6,000 of supportive services to achieve a successful outcome. Herring-Cozy says that Indianapolis also needs a fully functioning housing agency. The Indianapolis Housing Agency entered a cooperative agreement between HUD and the city after years of mismanagement and dysfunction.
It's essentially in a recovery process.
Stakeholders agreed that because of the challenges of the pandemic, financing units, construction, and issues at the housing agency, there's a need for creative solutions. That's where the new master leasing program comes in. The city is currently building partnerships with landlords to create 5-year leases for people to be housed in addition to building new complexes. It's considered a form of permanent supportive housing. DMD's Stockman says this solution addresses another long-time barrier.
This is a very landlord-friendly state. A lot of people experiencing homelessness have had various challenges with their rental history, and those challenges keep people from being housed.
A count of people experiencing homelessness in Indianapolis last year found 1,701 on a single night in January. I'm Zach Castle.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by Drew Daudelin and Zach Bundy, with support from the news team at WFYI and public media journalists across the state. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. Kendall Antron produced our music, and I'm your host, Abriana Herron. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.